If you are over 60, there is a truth that few dare to say out loud. In the eyes of the healthcare system, you are sometimes no longer seen as a full human being with equal worth, but merely as a number that represents cost, complexity, and the extra time a doctor must spend. It sounds cruel, but that is the hidden corner most patients never notice until it is too late. Imagine walking into a clinic with an anxious heart and a list of symptoms that have been troubling you for months. Instead of being heard, you are interrupted after only a few sentences. Instead of a thorough check, you receive empty reassurances like, at your age, this is normal. You leave with a simple prescription and the heavy feeling that you have just been excluded from the right to proper care. Not because you do not matter, but because the system quietly labeled you the moment it saw your date of birth on the chart. The shocking truth is that many older people do not lose their final years to illness, but to indifference that has been normalized. Heart attacks are mistaken for anxiety. Signs of serious disease are brushed aside with the excuse of just aging. And prescriptions for sedatives are sometimes written not to heal, but to make patients easier to manage. Behind the polite smile of a doctor may hide a cold calculation. Whether you are worth the extra time, money, or risk of treatment. Behind simple advice may lie an avoidance of responsibility, where your age becomes an excuse for the system to conserve resources. And behind every rushed appointment is an unspoken message that you should accept decline as inevitable rather than expect comprehensive care. This is a bitter picture, but it is real. It is not the story of a few individuals, but the shared experience of millions of older patients around the world. And the most dangerous part is that many begin to believe these dismissals. They accept less than they deserve, stay silent in the face of unfairness, and gradually devalue their own lives. But this truth is not meant to make you hopeless. On the contrary, it is a wake-up call to open your eyes. You do not need to and should not play a supporting role in your own health journey. You can change how doctors see you, how the system treats you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. This is not just about exposing injustice. It is an invitation to become an active patient, an older person who dares to stand up and declare that you still have value, that you still deserve the best care, and that you will not let age become an excuse for others to decide your future. And this journey begins the moment you realize that the shocking truth may exist, but it does not define you. What you're about to discover will change the way you enter every appointment, the way you speak with your doctor, and even the way you protect each day that remains in your life. The first thing many doctors see is not your face, not your story, but your date of birth written in black and white on a chart. In that instant, something subtle but powerful happens. You are no longer just a patient. You are placed into a category, a mental shortcut that whispers to the physician before you even open your mouth. Older means complicated, older means costly, older means less promising. It is a judgment passed silently, yet it shapes every word and every action that follows. This bias is rarely intentional, but it is deeply ingrained. Modern medical training emphasizes efficiency, productivity, and managing limited resources. To save time, the mind of a doctor learns to scan for quick identifiers, and age becomes the easiest signal of all. A 40-year-old complaining of fatigue may be tested for heart disease, thyroid disorders, or nutritional deficiencies. A 70-year-old with the same complaint may be told to rest more and accept the natural decline of age. The same symptom, the same body speaking for help, but two very different responses. Science calls this phenomenon unconscious bias. The brain categorizes and filters information without awareness, allowing stereotypes to dictate decisions. Doctors are not immune, and the system reinforces these shortcuts every day. Schedules are overloaded, insurance pushes for speed, and guidelines often simplify seniors into checklists rather than individuals. What is lost in this process is the unique story of the person in front of them, the decades of resilience, the context of lifestyle, the subtle changes that only the patient truly understands. The danger of these invisible labels is not just in misdiagnoses, but in the erosion of dignity. When a physician assumes you will be difficult, the consultation grows shorter, the listening grows thinner, and the willingness to explore new solutions fades. Slowly, the patient becomes a passive figure, carried along by assumptions instead of leading their own healing journey. Many older adults start to believe the same narrative. They expect less from their doctors, they hesitate to insist on deeper investigation, and in doing so, they unintentionally confirm the very stereotype placed upon them. But this cycle can be broken. The first step is to recognize it. The moment you sit down with a healthcare professional, you can shift the dynamic by making your goals visible. Do not just say, "I feel tired." Say my energy has dropped by 40% over 3 months and I want to know why. Data, specifics, and clarity cut through bias. They transform you from a vague category into a unique case that demands attention. Another powerful act is to bring a concise health summary, a one-page document with key milestones, medications, and improvements you have achieved. When you show that you track your health with precision, you signal that you are a partner in care, not a burden. Doctors respond differently when they realize you are prepared and engaged. Finally, ask for structure. Say directly, "Doctor, I know time is limited. Can we schedule a longer appointment to discuss my cardiovascular health?" This shows respect for their schedule, but also asserts your right to thorough care. Bias thrives in silence and passivity, but it weakens when met with clarity and confidence. Invisible bias may begin with a number on a chart, but it does not have to define your experience. When you enter the room with preparation, specific goals, and the courage to demand equal attention, you remind the system that age is not a diagnosis. It is only one detail in the story of who you are, and your story is worth being heard in full. There is a truth so unsettling that many prefer not to face it. In countless hospitals and clinics, the value of your health is quietly weighed against the value of a machine, a budget line, or a financial quota. Behind every treatment recommendation lies an invisible calculation, one that asks not only what is medically possible, but also what is economically convenient. For older adults, this calculation often works against them. Consider the pressure that doctors face daily. Insurance companies demand efficiency, administrators demand higher patient volumes, and reimbursements continue to shrink. In this environment, time becomes money, and patients who require more of it are silently placed in a different category. Older adults with their multiple conditions, complex histories, and longer consultations are seen not as individuals needing more care, but as obstacles to productivity. This perception breeds a subtle resentment that seeps into clinical decisions. Imagine an elderly man walking into an orthopedic office with severe knee pain. The standard of care might suggest joint replacement surgery, a procedure that could restore mobility and quality of life. Yet in too many cases, the response is a dismissive suggestion to manage with painkillers or physical therapy. Why? Because surgery is expensive, risky, and the system quietly asks whether a man in his 70s is worth the investment. What is lost in this reasoning is the simple fact that his years still matter, his ability to walk still matters, his dignity still matters. The tragedy is that economics are not presented openly. Families are told surgery is too risky, or that aggressive treatment may not be suitable at this stage of life. These words sound medical, but the hidden driver is cost. And when patients accept these explanations without question, they unknowingly allow economic bias to dictate the length and quality of their remaining years. Yet there is a deeper question here. What is the purpose of medicine if not to preserve and enhance life? If ethics yield to economics, then the very soul of healthcare is compromised. A system built to heal becomes a marketplace where treatments are rationed not by medical necessity, but by actuarial spreadsheets. The danger is not only for today's seniors, but for all who will one day grow older. Breaking this pattern requires courage. It begins with asking direct questions. If I were younger, would you recommend a different treatment? If so, what is the medical reason for withholding it now? Such questions force clarity and peel away the protective layer of vague explanations. They remind the physician that decisions must be based on science, not budgetary assumptions. Another path is knowledge. Research outcomes for your condition at your age. Many studies prove that seniors respond remarkably well to advanced treatments when given the chance. Carry that evidence with you. Present it to your doctor. It is harder to deny care when the facts are placed directly on the table. And finally, cultivate the belief that your life cannot be discounted. Economics may whisper that your years are fewer, but ethics demand that each one be honored fully. A single day of mobility, a single month of independence, a single year of joy with family, these are beyond price. No formula can capture their worth. When economics overshadow ethics, the human spirit pays the price. But when you refuse to be reduced to a calculation, you reclaim the truth that your life is still invaluable. Medicine should not ask what is profitable, it should ask what is possible. And for you, it is always worth fighting for what is possible. One of the most painful forms of discrimination in healthcare is not written in charts or displayed in policies. It happens in conversations. It happens in the way older adults are spoken to, or more precisely, spoken over. The silence that follows is not chosen, it is imposed. Picture the moment. An older patient begins describing a cluster of symptoms carefully gathered over weeks. Before the story is complete, the doctor interrupts. Let us focus on your main concern today. What feels like efficiency to the physician becomes dismissal to the patient. Important details are lost, connections are overlooked, and the patient leaves with both untreated symptoms and a heavy sense of invisibility. This silencing is not always loud, but it is persistent. Research shows that doctors spend significantly less time listening to patients over 65 than to younger patients with the same conditions. Why? Because the stereotype persists that older adults are long-winded, repetitive, or incapable of distinguishing between relevant and irrelevant information. Instead of curiosity, the consultation is driven by impatience. The result is devastating delays in diagnosis and treatment. Psychologically, the impact cuts deep. When older patients are repeatedly interrupted or minimized, they begin to internalize the message that their voices no longer matter. Over time, many stop speaking up at all. They withhold concerns, they downplay pain, they shrink their story into something more convenient for the system. This self-censorship does not protect them, it harms them. Silent symptoms become neglected, illnesses and dignity erodes each time the unspoken words remain inside. But this imposed silence can be challenged. The first strategy is preparation. Create a written symptom timeline with dates, intensity levels, and patterns. When you present your health as data, it is harder to dismiss. Instead of saying, I have been more tired lately, you can say, since the 3rd of April, I need daily naps for the first time in my life. That level of detail transforms your voice into evidence that demands respect. The second strategy is clarity. State your goals at the beginning of the appointment. Today, I want to discuss 3 specific concerns, and I would like us to explore each one. This frames the conversation with boundaries that make it harder for interruptions to erase your story. The third strategy is advocacy. Bring someone with you not only for support, but as a witness. When another person is present, doctors are more likely to listen fully. That companion can ask follow-up questions, take notes, and reinforce points you may forget in the moment. Silence imposed on one voice is harder to enforce when another voice echoes beside it. Above all, resist the temptation to retreat into passivity. Your story is not a burden, it is the foundation of your care. Every symptom described clearly, every detail shared confidently, every insistence on being heard. These are acts of self-protection as vital as any medication. The imposed silence may begin with a polite interruption or a sigh of impatience, but it does not have to end there. Each time you reclaim your right to speak, you remind the system that your life is not a summary, not a stereotype, and certainly not an afterthought. Your words carry the weight of truth, and they deserve space in every consultation. There is a truth many find hard to accept. Not every pill prescribed to older adults is given with healing in mind. In too many cases, medications become tools of convenience. A silent weapon used to make patients easier to manage rather than healthier. Walk through any long-term care facility and you will see it. Sedatives for the anxious, antidepressants for the questioning, sleep aids for the restless. These are not always prescribed because of clinical necessity, but because they quiet the noise, smooth out the frustration, and reduce the demand on overworked staff. It is chemical restraint disguised as medical care. The tragedy is that it often goes unnoticed because it wears the mask of professionalism. The consequences are anything but benign. Sedatives that are meant to calm can cloud the mind, increasing confusion that gets misdiagnosed as dementia. Sleep aids meant to soothe can disrupt natural sleep cycles, leaving patients more fatigued and dependent. Mood stabilizers can drain vitality, creating apathy that is then labeled as depression. The very drugs prescribed to help can generate the very symptoms they claim to treat. Consider the story of an older woman recovering from surgery. Frustrated by slow progress, she asked detailed questions about her rehabilitation timeline. Instead of being engaged in honest dialogue, she was labeled difficult. A prescription for anxiety medication followed not because she had an anxiety disorder, but because it made her easier to handle. Within weeks, she experienced balance, problems, confusion, and a devastating fall that prolonged her recovery by months. The initial injury was healing, but the treatment meant to silence her voice created even greater harm. This misuse of medication is not driven only by individuals, it is fueled by systemic pressures. Facilities encourage compliance because medicated patients require less staff attention. Insurance companies approve psychiatric drugs more readily than therapy or extended consultations because they are cheap. Even families overwhelmed by the emotional demands of caregiving sometimes request medications to calm their loved one. In each case, the patient's autonomy and dignity shrink while control expands. But control is not care. Real care begins with curiosity, with asking what pain, fear, or unmet need lies beneath the behavior. Reaching for the prescription pad without that curiosity risks reducing a human being to a problem that needs suppressing rather than a life that needs healing. What can be done? The first defense is clarity. Before accepting any medication, ask what specific condition is this drug treating? What measurable outcome will show it is working? How and when will we know to stop it? Vague answers like "to help you relax" are not sufficient. The second defense is evidence. Research your prescriptions using reliable medical sources. Look for known side effects, interactions, and non-pharmacological alternatives. Many issues addressed with drugs can also be managed with lifestyle adjustments, therapy, or environmental changes that carry fewer risks. The third defense is accountability. Request periodic medication reviews, ideally with a pharmacist or geriatric specialist who is trained to identify unnecessary or harmful prescriptions. Document your baseline mental clarity, mobility, and mood before starting any psychiatric medication so you can clearly recognize harmful changes. Finally, never fight this battle alone. Build a support network of family, friends, or advocates who can question decisions when you cannot. If medication dulls your voice, someone else must be there to amplify it. Medications are powerful tools, but they should serve healing, not control. To accept drugs without scrutiny is to surrender your autonomy piece by piece. To question them is not rebellion, it is responsibility. You are not a problem to be managed. You are a life to be honored, and every prescription should reflect that truth. Behind closed doors in conference rooms and policy meetings, something deeply unsettling happens. Human lives are reduced to numbers placed into formulas that weigh cost against expected years left to live. It is called quality adjusted life years, a cold calculation that assigns higher worth to the young and lower worth to the old. In this framework, a 70-year-old's remaining time is judged less valuable than a 40-year-old's, and that judgment quietly shapes the care offered. The consequences are harsh. Older adults are more often steered toward palliative measures rather than aggressive treatment. Expensive surgeries are described as too risky advanced therapies as not worth the strain. Families are subtly encouraged to choose cheaper options framed as compassionate care, but in truth influenced by hidden economics. What sounds like a medical decision is sometimes nothing more than financial triage. Imagine an engineer in his late 60s diagnosed with kidney failure. Instead of being offered dialysis immediately, he is told that at his age, comfort care might be best. Yet when he finally fights for treatment, he regains strength, resumes daily life, and lives 7 more meaningful years. 7 years of laughter, a family of purpose. Years he nearly lost to a system that discounted his value on a balance sheet. This logic is not limited to chronic disease. Preventive screenings, imaging studies, and mental health support are often denied to older adults on the assumption that they will not live long enough to benefit. Depression in seniors is dismissed as part of aging therapy, labeled a waste of resources, and advanced diagnostic testing withheld because of actuarial predictions. These decisions strip away dignity, reducing complex lives to mere probabilities. The most devastating impact is not just physical but psychological. When patients hear repeatedly that treatment is unnecessary because of their age, they begin to believe it. They start to think of themselves as less deserving, as if their lives truly are worth less than others. This internalized devaluation leads many to stop advocating for themselves, accepting limitations that were never inevitable. But the truth is simple and unshakable. The value of a life cannot be measured in spreadsheets. A single day of clarity with the grandchild, a single year of independence, a single moment of purpose, these defy economic calculations. They are priceless. No formula can determine the worth of your remaining years. To challenge this bias, older adults must learn to ask the piercing question: would you recommend this treatment if I were younger? This forces providers to separate medical reasoning from economic assumptions. When doctors realize they must justify their decisions without the shield of age, the bias begins to crack. Another powerful step is evidence. Research outcomes for your condition among people your age. show that seniors often benefit as much as, and sometimes more, than younger patients when given proper care. Bring this data with you, let it speak against the hidden formulas that undervalue your life. Legal advocacy can also play a role. Age-based denial of care may violate laws against discrimination, and patient rights organizations exist to challenge these injustices. Seeking multiple opinions, especially from specialists in geriatric care, often reveals options overlooked or denied by general practitioners. At its core, the message is clear. Your life is not a discount item, not a diminished investment, not a fading figure on a chart. It is full, it is worthy, and it deserves the best that medicine can offer. The system may try to calculate your worth, but only you can define it. Stand firm in the truth that your years, whether many or few, hold infinite value. By now, the picture is clear. Invisible bias economic shortcuts impose silence, the misuse of medication, and the cruel reduction of life to numbers. All of these forces shape the healthcare experience of older adults. It is a landscape filled with barriers. Yet within every barrier lies the chance for breakthrough. Aging does not have to